Next to this quarry, a group called the Quarrymen performed at a village fete. There are no plaques or signposts, but at the side of this picturesque quarry is one of the most significant sites in the whole history of rock and roll, because in this ground here, is where Paul McCartney first saw John Lennon perform with the Quarrymen, where they first got together. And from here, the whole history of rock and roll was to change. And Liverpool was to become the rocking city, create a type of rock and roll, and take it right back to the home of rock and roll in America. I'm here at St. Peter's Village Hall, just a short walk away from the village fete where the Quarrymen played, about 20 yards from the gravestone of a certain Eleanor Rigby. And in this very room, rock and roll was redefined when Paul sat down to chat with John, and John started playing some chords on his guitar, and Paul started writing out some lyrics for him, and the two of them began to chat, realized that they had a closeness between them almost straight away, and as a result, the huge explosion and exciting new rock and roll hit the world in the 60s, and it was all born in this very room. The two of them got together, met, were kindred spirits, and soon after, one of John's friends went up to Paul and said, "John wants you to join the group."
In the Liverpool home where he lived with his aunt and uncle, John Lennon dreamed of becoming a rock star like Elvis Presley. Just down the road lived Paul McCartney, whose father once played in a ragtime band. George Harrison, who lived in this house and rode the bus to school every day with Paul, idolized guitarist Duane Eddy. Growing up near the city's docks, Ringo Starr played drums with Liverpool's biggest rock band, the Hurricanes, until he met the Beatles in Hamburg, Germany.
None of them had been abroad before, and suddenly we're in this neon-lit street with all sorts of sex shops and gangsters on the door, and they were just boggled-eyed. They served their musical apprenticeship in Hamburg. They worked sometimes from 6 o'clock at night till 3 o'clock in the morning. And they exploded on stage. The bouncers thought, oh my God, there's a fight. And it wasn't. It was the explosion of the Beatles.
And then we went back to Liverpool and got quite a few bookings. You know, they all thought we were German. You know, Bill was from Hamburg, and they all said, you speak good English.
And Brian suggested that we just sort of wore ordinary suits. So we just got what we thought were quite good suits and just got rid of the leather gear.
Bands like ourselves and the Beatles and the Big Three and the Searchers and everyone, we all tried to be unique and play our own type of music, what we liked, and tried to get our own sound. And because we all were resident at the Cavern Club, it was that was the place to come and see all the bands.
It wasn't just the music when you went to see the Beatles. You knew you were going to come out on a high, an absolute high.
This is Matthew Street. This is where the Cavern Club was a really raving place in the 60s. Started off as a trad jazz club, and then the swinging blue jeans made the place very popular with the blue jeans night out, and then the Beatles started to play here, and all the other groups like the Searchers and Jerry and the Pacemakers, and this is where the Cavern was. People ask me about the Cavern, and I always tell them that it was sweaty, it smelt, but to me it was the best rock and roll place that ever was, you know. And in the early 60s, it was a place where kids could rock and roll and have fun without anybody getting on their backs. And it was a tremendous atmosphere, and I don't know why, but I always thought that the Beatles sounded better at the Cavern than anywhere. You know, they were a lot more ballsy than the records.
Brian Epstein, when he went down to the Cavern, which is... Brian hung out in a completely different world. He was rich. He had a successful family, successful furniture business that had a small record store in it, which is how people kept coming in and saying, hey, have you got that record of the Beatles and Tony Sheridan, that My Bonnie Lies Over the... Have you got that record? And after, like, the 40th time of kids coming in asking for the record, he said, well, you know, maybe I better get this record. And he started the record in, he sold it out, he got another 1,000, he sold that out, and he said, well, who are these kids? And they said, well, they're playing at this place called the Cavern. Why don't you go down and check them out?
The Beatles were then just four lads on that rather dimly lit stage. I was immediately struck by their music, their beat, and their sense of humour actually on stage. And even afterwards, when I met them, I was struck again by their personal charm. And it was there that really it all started.
We do like the fans and enjoy reading the publicity about us, but from time to time you don't realise that it's actually about yourself.
And once when the boys came for me, they popped in to see me mum and my dad, you know. We had to go out the back because, you know, there's 20 or 30 outside. And they wouldn't believe me, mother, you know, they'd knock in saying, can we have their autographs?
The Beatles came down themselves about 2:30 in the morning, 3 o'clock, and they were talking to us and signing autographs, and then they went away, and then we sort of all sat down, and some of the lazy ones sort of fell asleep, but the rest of us just kept awake on coffee and dreams of the Beatles.
The Beatles were like a gift from God. I was just at the perfect age for that. 14. Gave us all an identity. And I've thought before, just for the music, it was such a bonus that the music was like the best music ever.
I was Beatles all the way, man. I was my bedroom wall was in fact completely covered. The walls, ceilings, doors, any Beatle pictures were stuck on my wall, and I used to have these fantasies of Paul McCartney marrying my sister and all this kind of crazy stuff, you know, and how wonderful it all was.
You're going over to the States early in the new year, and you're going to top the bill on the Ed Sullivan Coast to Coast show. John, so far, all British pop stars have not made a tremendous impact on the States. How do you think you're going to fare?
Well, I can't really say, can I? I mean, is it up to me? No. I mean, I just hope we go all right, you know.
Are you going to vary your act at all for the American audience?
No, I mean, we haven't really got an act, so we'll just do what we do.
I went to New York with the boys, and you would see men of, you know, middle-aged men walking down Fifth Avenue with Beatle wigs on their heads. And no matter where you turned your dial on your radio, at any time of the day, you would hear a Beatles song. It was complete saturation. I think life for the Beatles in the early days was very tough. Once the success had come, once they were not only a success in England, but also broke the breaches in America, then they lived in a giant goldfish bowl and they couldn't escape.
The British invasion this time goes by the code name Beatlemania. D-Day has been common knowledge for months, and this was the day.
The Beatles are coming, it got bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger, and so finally we got to the point where they landed at the airport in New York, and there was like 50,000 people there. It was unbelievable.
That's it. This is it. It's all over, but the shouting. We had never seen an airport that you couldn't get to because of kids standing out there screaming. We'd never seen kids fainting like that at concerts. We never heard screams like that you couldn't even hear the music while the guys and you knew they were playing. We knew that there was a problem, and it just landed.
I knew that they were different, and I knew that their voices blended together, and I knew they had a great talent. And I knew they were going to be big, and I hated them for that.
What do you think of the comment that you're nothing but a bunch of British Elvis Presley?
Oh, it's not true. It's not true.
Are you going to get a haircut while you're here?
Nope, no thanks. I had one yesterday. That's no lie. True.
I remember I came downstairs one day, I combed my hair down, a Beatle haircut. My father laughed. He thought that was so funny. And then when he realized that I wasn't going to comb it back again, he got really pissed off.
These girls were losing their minds. I mean, this appealed to me in a very fundamental way. I think I was about 13 or 14, and these girls were going nuts.
I was pregnant with Kenya, my daughter, when the Beatles thing swept, okay? And I remember I Want to Hold Your Hand, and I'd be in the kitchen just sweeping and cooking and taking care of the babies and singing I Want to Hold Your Hand.
I was so taken with I Want to Hold Your Hand that I stayed up all night because I didn't have a copy of it and I wanted to hear it. They played it once an hour, I think.
When we saw what happened with the Beatles, we got together and had a meeting and said, look, now what are we going to do here? We're getting eclipsed by a group called the Beatles from London. Oh, my God. We were completely jealous as hell. I guess we might have turned our motors on, trying to get something happening where we would be better musically than the Beatles.
We always take my car because it's never been beat, and we've never missed yet with the girls we meet. None of the guys go steady because it wouldn't be right to leave the best girl home now on Saturday night. I get around, round, round, I get around, get around, round, round, I get around, get around, round, round, I'm in the river of prayer. I get around, round, round, get around, I get around, yeah, get around, round, round, I get around.
The Beach Boys were hugely important, demonstrating what you could do in a studio and what you couldn't do in a studio, and opening up that. And Motown had already done that to some extent. You know, Motown had actually shown that black pop dance music, R&B dance music, could just be extraordinarily beautiful to listen to and beautifully produced and elegant. And it was very, very big influence.
When we first started to make a bunch of hits in Detroit, and we called it the Motown sound, people were coming from Africa, they were coming from England, they were coming from Chicago and New York and Nashville and Memphis to record their people in Detroit.